Patrick John and Mike Perdue met for the first time on September 19, 1980, at the Anchorage Hotel, not far from the capital. The ex-colonel was in a bad place. He used to be a prime minister, now he was a pig farmer. He built a pen near his house and purchased 3 sows and a boar. The animals were to be fed with bananas. Perhaps in some way this was an upgrade from being a colonel of a nation without an army. Operation Red Dog, Chapter 4: The Center of Gravity. In order for his mercenary plan to succeed, Mike Perdue needed a puppet, a credible local leader who becomes the public face of the revolution. And he just found a great candidate. The two men talked. The next morning, Perdue received a letter of intent. I, Patrick John, do hereby agree in principle with the general provisions of the proposed agreement, subject to further discussions and amendments. This wasn't a formal contract yet, but it was a start. American to the very core, Perdue decided to take a business-like approach to the coup. He hoped it would help convince wary investors to put up cash he desperately needed to finance the invasion. So he created a company called Nortic Enterprises. The fee that Perdue was going to receive for overthrowing the government of Dominica would go to Nortic. So would all the revenues delivered from the development of the island, the logging of the rainforests, agriculture, the airport, banks, casinos, and tourist facilities. To raise capital for the coup, Perdue was going to sell shares in Nortic, and the mercenaries who participated in the attack would also be offered Nortic shares as a form of payment. He guaranteed a 25-to-1 return on the investment. He said he had already sold 7 shares and there were only 2 or 3 left. That was a lie. He passed around the letter signed by Patrick John and said that CIA was backing the whole thing. That was a lie as well. Perdue pitched the idea to the investors, but there were no takers. The moneybags didn't feel comfortable with the whole thing. The pitch was a miserable failure. He went back to Houston empty-handed. But there was good news as well. Something was happening in Dominica. Turns out, Patrick John still had his loyalists in important positions in the government. They wanted to speak to Perdue at once. There was an alliance forming. Patrick John, a former prime minister and a colonel turned pig farmer. Major Frederick Newton, head of the military, Captain Malcolm Reed, second in command of the military. The Dreads, the Rastafarian gang, were represented by a few people as well. And of course there was Mike Perdue himself, a sociopath American soldier of fortune and a scam artist. Whites, blacks, ex-KKK, the American far-right, Caribbean leftists, white nationalists, black revolutionaries, capitalists, socialists. In terms of ideological diversity, the group of conspirators resembled a party in an Obsidian RPG. Only one type of man could have managed such a political juggling act, one who believed in nothing at all, writes Canadian author Stuart Bell, who extensively researched these events for his book The Bayou of Pigs. The Dreads were a long-term enemy of Patrick John, but they figured if they assist with the coup, the new government would owe them a favor, and the Dreads would at last be able to live close to nature and worship Jah without harassment. But neither the Defense Force nor the Rastafarians could do it by themselves. They didn't have weapons, they were not professional soldiers. Algie Maffei was one of the leaders of the Dreads. He had a curious backstory. Algie was locked up when a hurricane hit the island, completely obliterating Stock Farm Prison. He didn't escape. He was freed by an act of nature. Although he was still wanted for the murder of the farmer found dead near his banana plantation, the coup was a way for him to escape the police investigation. Perdue made a deal with the Rastafarians. He said he would finance and build a ganja depot that would buy marijuana from the Dreads and ship it to foreign markets. The Dreads farmed their own marijuana. It was their way of life and their social outlook. It was a spiritual act for the Rastafarians. They believed it brought them closer to God. They also claimed that ganja originated in African continent and that smoking it was a way of returning to their roots. Perdue not only promised them income for doing what they were doing anyway, but also a chance to export their philosophy and ideology. Algie accepted the offer. Perdue also offered to let the Dreads grow coca, which would be processed into cocaine and exported, but Algie said that it went against the culture of the Dread movement. The conspirators went over the details. All arms were kept under lock at the Central Police Station. If Perdue could get Patrick John's loyalists enough firepower, they could mount the coup themselves with the mercenaries as backup. The mercenary force would be present for the coup and they would fire if they had to, but they would only step in when absolutely necessary. Perdue liked this plan. There was a debate over the fate of the old government. The military officers thought Eugenia Charles and her ministers should be deported, but the bloodthirsty dreads wanted to kill all the politicians and policemen. Perdue feared that a slaughter of opposition figures would be a terrible PR move. The conspirators then sealed their bond by making him an honorary member of the defense force. Perdue was given the rank of captain. His problems just kept solving themselves. After returning to Houston, he had shared the news with a Texan investor who gave him over $10,000 in cash and 2 checks, one for $12,000 and other for $20,000. Now he could start buying gear and hiring mercs. The center of gravity is a concept developed by a Prussian military theorist Karl von Clausewitz in his book On War, written mostly after the Napoleonic Wars between 1816 and 1830. The definition of the center of gravity is the source of power that provides moral or physical strength, freedom of action, or will to act. The center of gravity in Dominica was the police HQ, a cement compound that occupied 1/2 of a block at the edge of the capital. It was the most heavily fortified place on the island. The Criminal Investigation Division was on the first floor of Block A. 24 officers worked there during the day, but only a single policeman remained on duty at night. The communications section was on the top floor. It was referred to as the control room. The telephone and radio equipment was kept there. It was manned 24 hours a day. Somewhere around here was the armory, where they kept all the guns. Dominica had no real military. This was the sum of their national defenses. Whoever controlled this one cluster of buildings would control the entire island. And it certainly did not look well protected. Perdue figured that if a few mercs armed with heavy weapons were to bust in at night, it would be all over. The dominoes will fall like a house of cards. Checkmate.